I'm just gonna rant about something that I thought about when I was making my last video. Don't be one of those people who assumes that they can't figure things out by themselves. We can figure things out on our own. We can tinker with things until we get the result that we need. And that is possible to do without relying on anybody else. Because our brains have the mental capacity to think about things without the need of anybody else's input. But what I'm seeing an increase of is people who are under the assumption that they need other people to tell them how to do everything. I'm not saying I look down at the people who don't figure things out on their own and rely on other people to tell them what to do. What I'm saying is people are increasingly becoming less willing to mess around with things and to do things on their own. Because what happens is those people, if they don't know how to do something, they don't make an attempt to figure it out on their own. They watch a YouTube tutorial, or they ask someone who they know knows the answer. So therefore, since they've got these alternative options, there's no incentive for them to think of these things on their own. And I don't think that's necessarily a good thing, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing either. And I'm not saying that you can't watch tutorials. I'm not saying that you shouldn't ask people for help. In fact, I'm saying quite the opposite. You should ask for help when you need help. You should watch tutorials if you're just not getting something and you need to figure it out. And you can't figure it out on your own, so you need someone else's help. Something that makes humans very smart is the ability to collaborate. So if you're trying to figure out how to pull off a certain effect when you're working on a video, for example, I'm using video production as an example, but this can really apply to anything. What I would suggest is to try figuring it out on your own. And if you try this every single time, if you spend some time trying to figure out how to pull off a certain effect by yourself, I guarantee that you will find that a lot of the time when you take the time to try and figure it out, you'll actually succeed. It might take a while the first couple of times if you're not really used to that sort of thing, but as you get used to tinkering and messing around with things, you'll slowly start to build a greater knowledge of whatever video program you're working in. So when there's another video effect that you need to figure out how to do, you can refer back to other techniques that you've learned in previous videos that you've made. For example, I don't know if you've seen my mask versus matte video. I believe it's called Masking Out Complex Objects. In that video, I show you how to use a matte rather than a mask to get rid of a tree and then repaste it on top of text in the background. And then I show you what the difference between a mask and a matte is. I did not look up a tutorial to learn how to do that technique. That's not how I did it. I figured out how to do it on my own. And this is how. I knew previously, before I learned anything about this technique, I had previous knowledge of what some of the effects that I needed to use were. So for example, threshold, I already knew what threshold was because I've messed with it before. So knowing that I needed threshold in order to pull off this effect was not as hard of a conclusion to come to since I had previous experience with it. And the only reason I had previous experience with it was because I had messed around with it in previous projects. Same thing with the matte. There's a previous project I was working on where I was trying to composite something on top of a video, but I was also trying to get something else to pass in front of the object that was actually in the scene. So just by simply dragging some of these matte plugins onto my footage and then messing around with the settings, I could infer and figure out what each effect does. And that's all you really need to know when you're trying to pull off some sort of effect, is by knowing what your plugins do. And if you know what your plugins do, then you know what you'll need in order to pull off the effect. So then, and I just kept messing around with it. Probably took me close to 30 minutes, but I eventually got it. And while you could argue that if I had looked up a tutorial on how to do it, I could have gotten it done way sooner. But I'm kind of glad that I figured it out on my own, because at the same time, even though it took me longer, it still gave me the satisfaction of knowing that I am more capable than I give myself credit for. Because it does feel good figuring out something on your own with no help. And that's just something that I wanted to share with you, is this, just really simply, you are more capable than you give yourself credit for. Just think of something that you want to do, and then try and do it. And more likely than not, you can do it. Now, there might be some situations where you try and do something, and no matter what you try, you can't get it. And that's fine. That'll happen a lot. Then if you want to look up a tutorial, that's fine. If you want to ask for help, that's fine. Just don't automatically assume that you can't do something, because that's increasingly what's becoming of people my age, is that they don't even try to do things on their own. That's all I wanted to say. That's all I wanted to talk about. It was just something that was on my mind, and I thought it would be something that would be important to share. And yeah, that's about it.